Good morning. Wait a minute, got a squeaky chair. I do that sometimes. I start my introduction and then... Anyway, okay, so excuse me for that. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever it is, wherever you are. Welcome to the Good Values podcast. Now this episode, I have a guest who I've only met twice. Lovely person, absolutely lovely. First time I met them was at an art festival. Lots of artists were exhibiting their work. It was outdoors. It was in a wooded area, and I'd arrived very early before anyone else with my friend who was exhibiting there, and I wasn't. Now, this friend of mine you've seen on the podcast, if you've seen every episode of the podcast, she's called Petra Goetz, and I'll put a link to her episode here. And I was helping her set up her work. She'd invited me the day before, and I thankfully jumped at the opportunity. And it was a long day. It was really interesting. It was really fun, but it was a lot of work. And I like days like that. They're good. So what happened was we turned up at this wooded area in North Wales. I might as well tell you where, in Bethesda. Not that you might not know that, but anyone who's in North Wales might know Bethesda. And it's a lovely little town. And this wooded area is just kind of off to the side of the town. It's not, way out where you've got to drive way out of Bethesda to the borders of the town. It's literally just there, which to me is quite a novelty. I suppose it's much like how I live right on the edge of Rhyl. And Rhyl there's a town and then there's the beach, and it's right there. It's right next to it. So Bethesda's got just like this lovely wooded area, and it's really nice. And it's like got a little stream running through it as well. Really nice little idyllic spot. And Petra and I got there. We started setting up bits of her work. I was doing more carrying than setting up at first, because I don't know what she was hoping to do until I started to get my bearings really with what the arrangement was. Because I'd shown up with minimal information, which I do a lot of the time. Anyway, we show up, we're setting this stuff up, and then we get further into the wooded area and it opens up, and there's all these rocks and things. It's beautiful. And we're considering how to set up her found objects, which she collects, and then she works with to put texture on top of these objects. So she'll find a place where people have been fly tipping, and she'll pick up certain objects and items that have an interesting shape to her, and then she'll put on top, it looks like concrete, but it's not, they're really light. So she'll put on top, I think it's papier-mâché, but it's all bobbly. And and then she's got loads of different shapes of these things, and when they all sit with each other in a different space, they kind of, it changes. If you only have a couple of them, it's different than if you have just one of them, and then it's changed by if you have quite a few of them or if you have all of them. And especially when they're dotted about an area, they all seem to change each other. They kind of interact with each other, and they make the space transform into something else. It was really nice. Then other artists started showing up, and we were discussing with them, what space was available and what wasn't, and what they thought. And they were lovely as well. The artists who showed up were doing some really nice things with, they had things which they were hanging from trees, which were big plastic sculptures which they'd made, and arranging leaves, like the coloured leaves, in circles and spirals, and collected into kind of holes of trees that had some kind of rot or something like that, and instead just filling them with, it wasn't the leaves, it was filling them with, they were kind of not seeds, and not, they kind of, I suppose they're kind of like seeds. I don't know what they were. Let's say they're seeds from, say it was from an acorn tree, but they weren't acorns. I don't know how to explain this stuff. I'm not very good with the different variants of what the genuses of certain plants, so you'll have to forgive me, but if I have photographs, I'll put them up now because they were lovely. And this is where I met the organizer, or one of the organizers, but I saw her as the main organizer. And she came up and she was absolutely lovely, such a warm person. And she was, basically she had on a tree bits of, they were kind of like little handmade books with drawings on them. But the drawings were, I think they were part of a pattern of, I think it was part of something to do with the trees. I want to say the tree trunk, part of kind of either energy that she feels from it, or it was part of a pattern that she'd seen on it, or it was part of a trail through it. It was something which I'd not got the details solid in my head, but it was lovely anyway. It was really nice, really interesting. So we had her work, we had the couple who came with the plastic sculpture and the leaves and the seeds, and then another artist showed up and she did beautiful silk sheets which she had printed photographs on there, and I'm hoping to have her on the podcast. I did talk to her about this. And then there was another artist who had big plastic sheets with print on it. Really interesting, diverse mix of bits and bobs. And then at the end of the day, taking all of Petra's work back to her car, and I caught up with this organizer and asked her to be on the podcast. And she was so gracious. Straight away, she agreed. She said she was going to be away for a week, but then after that, she'd be free. And she was just there. She was reliable. She was wonderful. Really is very, very nice indeed. And I wish I would have done more background research, because it turns out I've seen her work before when I went and visited Storiel Gallery in Bangor with a young artist who was on the second episode of Good Values, Aisha J. Her and I went to Storiel and we saw several exhibits, and then we went for a walk around Bangor. And basically, one of the exhibitors in Storiel was the guest today. And I would have asked her about it, but stupidly, I didn't do that research. Now, I'm going to make my excuse for why that is. I have had a bit of a busy time lately. What's happened is I've been applying for a grant money from the Arts Council of Wales with Petra. Her and I are collaborating on some work, so this is kind of an official announcement really, and we will be starting to introduce bits of vlogs and just video installments of what we've been doing so far, and I'm really excited about the project, and I'll talk about how it develops, how to apply for the for a grant money, and what our experience has been. But that's all to come maybe later this year and more next year. But for now, this is the wonderful, lovely, gracious, talented guest, Lisa Hudson. Would you mind introducing yourself for the audience, please?
Certainly. I am Lisa Hudson, and I'm an artist and art educator, and I live in Bethesda in North Wales, which is just on the edge of Snowdonia National Park.
Oh, fantastic. Beautiful area as well. I was going to ask, how did you get started making art?
It's that thing, isn't it, that you always get in artist biographies where they go, oh, he was always drawing, he was drawing before he could walk. And it's kind of, well, sort of everybody does. And then some people just don't stop.
Yeah.
And I didn't, I was good at drawing when I was a small child. I think every small child is told they're good at drawing. And then when I got to secondary school, I definitely wasn't. So I didn't actually get to take art GCSE or A level.
Oh, really?
Textiles GCSE, and didn't do very well. And then it wasn't until I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I had 2 kids, and I saw an advert for art classes. I'd tried an access course when I was in my early 20s, and that didn't stick either. So yeah, I did the Bangor University Fine Art Challenge, which sounded just about my level. So, you get to have a go at lots of things, and it's really nice and easy. And before I knew it, I got sucked in, because I obviously reached the stage where you didn't have to draw a perfect trainer that was sitting on the middle of the table in pencil on an A4 page in order to be seen as having some skills. So yeah, that's when it was really when I started that course in early 2000s that it took off.
So is that what happened in school? Was it that your draftsmanship wasn't deemed, honed enough? Is that what the problem was? Yeah.
Yes, they did a lot of putting things on the table and asking us to draw them, and in pencil, on an A4 sheet. And people who did lots of shading and made it look a bit like the shoe or the book or the bowl of fruit were good enough to take art GCSE, and people who had wobbly shoes and smudgy things were not.
Oh, really?
Wobbly and smudgy kind of person.
Well, that's kind of changed now, I suppose, unless I'm, misunderstanding the approach they still take maybe in high school, but I'm not sure whether that's being updated to being more open-minded to the spectrum of art making, where more unorthodox approaches are embraced. Do you know?
I'm not sure. When my daughters were in school, it still seemed quite limited. Certainly, it was certainly better than when I was there. You could be not very good at drawing but good at modelling here, and that was okay. You could still take art. So yes, maybe it has got a bit better. I think education moves much more slowly than society. Yeah,
I suppose it's a large ship to steer, I suppose, to change a curriculum and an ideology maybe. I was curious as well, with you mentioning about the Access course not going so well in your early 20s. Can you tell us what happened there as well? What was the issue?
For me, I think personally, Access courses are for older people, and I was 21, so I just missed going in as a normal, as a normally aged student. But most of the other people on the course were considerably older than me, and at 21, that felt quite a big gap. But also, I got pregnant in the October, so by the time it was the end of the year, I was a bit stuck for final work because I had other things going on.
Well, fair enough. Yeah. So it all just was a timing thing and a larger scale timing issue, maybe. But yeah.
But I do think confidence. I think as you get older as an artist, you get more confident and more able to make your own marks without comparing yourself to everybody else. Quite so much.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I was always like to ask people as well, what is it that you value about art?
For me, I value the way it allows me to investigate the world or to understand the world better. So making it definitely what I make art with in order to answer my own questions. I used to feel like I had to have a message in my art, but actually I'm more interested in figuring out answers, looking for answers than telling anyone anything. So what I value about art is its investigative nature and the freedom of that investigation, where you can find things out for yourself rather than being told something and accepting it. I think the freedom of exploration in art. I think, yes, it's the freedom of it. It can sort of be anything.
Yeah. Not to put you on the spot, but is there any example of a question that you were asking and sought out an answer, or discovered some kind of epiphany or anything where in the art making it had revealed itself?
So there's so many actually, but an obvious sort of a chunky one that I could say would be that in between 2018 and 2019, I was part of an artistic project called Merched Chwarel, which is quarry women in Welsh, and there was 4 artists who were all living near or on quarries, 4 female artists, and we were investigating how do the quarries kind of mediate our view of the world. How is it being women in a society which is kind of ruled by these masculine spaces, and a history that talks of the quarry men all the time as if there weren't any women involved at all. It's like they're highly mentioned. And as a incomer to Wales, I have been here 24 years now, but you're still an incomer, really. It was through doing that project, through talking to local people about the history of the quarries, through picking up slate, working with it, drilling into it, stitching into it, I found I was picking up more Welsh. I was understanding places that I walked through or past every single day. And by the end of the project, I'd kind of discovered my place in where I live. And that was kind of the question that we were looking at, is how are we affected by where we live? And that was when I realized that I wanted to stay here, that I had actually come home, whatever that meant.
Oh, beautiful. That's lovely. Oh, that's a fantastic thing. Well, yeah. So it is a real discovery, and a real discovery of yourself, I suppose, and how you feel and see yourself in your environment. So that's really nice.
It was unexpected as well. I knew we were asking the question, but I didn't expect it to have a profound impact on me in my life. I was doing the work and realised that was happening.
Yeah. Does your work have a colour palette?
My 2D work is generally monochrome, or I use earth pigments, actually, sort of from the like ground up stones and things, because I'm quite scared of colour. I wear a lot of colour in myself, but I don't use it in my work unless it's natural colours, because they always seem to harmonise whatever you do.
Yeah.
And my 3D work is mainly, again, natural colours. I use a lot of natural materials. I kind of stick with those.
Beautiful. Can you tell us about your 3D work? What is it that you make, and that your body of work that you have?
So I make assemblages of found objects and natural materials. I use a lot of stitching. I seem to have a trend of making wearable art. So as part of the Mercatwarel project, I made a dress out of slate. So I drilled it was all slate from the slate tips around, all those quarries that we visited, in fact. And I drilled holes in it and stitched it to straps of fabric and wove those fabric together to make a sort of grid dress.
Wow.
And another exploration was me questioning what home means. What does it feel like? What does it mean to be at home? This was before Mercatwarel, actually. And I made towers, each with either ideas of home or homes that I had lived in, so flats I'd been in, or is home just a comfy chair, like in the song? Is home some sort of sanctuary? And those were made out of wet green bamboo, so they kind of warped as they dried, which was quite interesting. They were towers varying between sort of 6 and 4 foot high, with very, very long legs, because they were all sort of looking like they were going somewhere, and these tiny things on the top, and the things were gridded wire, fabric, small things that I'd found.
That's fantastic.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Absolutely, yeah. I suppose the follow-up question to that would be, where do you find a good source of inspiration for your work, or for being creative generally?
Well, it's me just trying to live my life, really. I come up with questions and stumbling blocks, and I'm sort of quite what if, or I wonder if, what happens if I do that? I like touching things. I like picking things up. I like, wrapping things up, and just, so I'm inspired by my relationship to the things and people and places around me. But more recently, I've been driven by the burning question that's driving everyone, which is more about what can we do to make the world a better place in face of the sort of overwhelming horrors that seem to be coming at us from every angle. So I do feel like I'm making less things and doing much more socially engaged practice these days, trying to seeing if art can be a vehicle to gather community, to tackle some of the bigger things, or even the small things that become bigger.
Yeah.
in the way the world is at the moment.
So like a think globally, act locally sort of principle. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So worrying, thinking more about where the materials come from, but also more about, what am I doing with my time? Is there, how can I use the freedom that I talked about earlier of being an artist, where you can kind of get away with doing anything in order to participate in the world in a more active way and trying to make it a better place.
Yeah.
I think art is kind of lucky. It seems to have less restrictions. There'll be organizations set up to tackle this, that, or the other, but they're all answerable to this, that, or the other as well. And so it's very hard to be free of politics or capitalism or these things in most fields. Whereas I think as artists, we can kind of wriggle through the cracks a bit and set up community groups, but call it an art project.
Yeah.
Plant gardens, again, call it an installation, things like that.
Yeah. It's nice just talking to people in public. Sometimes you don't realize how much of an impact a good conversation can have, where you truly listen to someone and try to find a good compromise between your strongly held beliefs and their expressed opinions and beliefs. I find that sometimes can be years after the fact that you can hear what that did to their life and their direction, I suppose, and it can be, profoundly beneficial and positive. So I wouldn't ever underestimate that, I suppose, and that's a really good means to try to improve things generally in your environment and in other people's. Yeah. I suppose the next thing which I'd like to know is, it's a bit of a general question, and it's not really mine. It's one which I'm going to steal from another podcast, but I really admire this artist, and she asks people this question all the time, and I always find it interesting how people answer. But what is art?
In a way, it's almost a redundant term. Think about it for too long.
Yeah.
It seems to be being replaced quite frequently with creative. So it's what is art? Is art aesthetics? What are aesthetics? Is it objects? Is it? I think for me, it's the way I think about something. Again, if it's that questioning and explorative thinking, then it can be art. It's almost, is it taking something and making it into something else so that you can understand it better?
That's interesting. Don't get me wrong, I don't have an answer.
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody does.
No.
One of the things we were asking in Utopia's Bach, because we were doing a lot of socially engaged stuff, a lot of what we were doing was just having meetings, actually, and working with relational aesthetics, which is a term coined sometime in the 90s about the sort of art which is just talking to people and sort of questioning why is it art. And they're actually speaking of the art is actually the atmosphere, the feeling between the people are weaving it as you create that atmosphere by how you are and how they respond. Yeah. So that could be an art. So in Utopia's Bach, we would stop every now and again and go, okay, where is the art? Just to make sure we hadn't wandered off down some social work track or something that we were completely not qualified to do. No.
Do you find a lot of reductive definitions are still circulating, such as, drawing, painting, sculpture is art? Or
I do. It does shock me the amount of, I do mix with a lot of artists all the time. So I'm in this bubble and I kind of think that everybody understands everything. And then you go to a family do or something and you get introduced to, this is my so-and-so niece, whatever, the painter or the artist. And they go, oh, what do you paint? Oh, go, no.
I paint life with words. Yeah, it's a bit of a challenge, isn't it, to try and broach concepts that are, I suppose, a little bit more maybe self-indulgent. I'm not sure. It feels quite indulgent to explore things which are just appreciations and observations. I'm not sure whether it's so easy to share and communicate sometimes, but yeah, I could be wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's on a personal level, I've been deeply affected and, had my worldview changed by pieces of art I've seen, but that might, other people have, maybe don't look at it that way and don't get the same response. So just presume that you're just giving them art bollocks, really, when you talk about it.
Well, I was told by someone that, what do you say your cat's name is again? Sorry.
Moo.
Moo. Oh, so cute. Is that because he's the colour of a cow? Moo.
I think so. He was kind of named that he's 16 years old, and he was
really
16 years ago by my daughter. He arrived in the house being called Mr. Mistopheles, but nobody ever called him that since then. Then we called him Felix, but then we thought that was a bit common.
Yeah. Oh, lovely.
Cat.
Lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? I think I was going to go back to the inspiration question and say how I found with some guests, I try to open up inspiration as far as it can be obviously, the landscape, or it can be other artists, but to also be music and poetry, and just to open up where inspiration can strike. But it was interesting that you said from yourself asking yourself questions. And I suppose I'm curious as to, I feel bad always asking you for more specifics, but is there any way that you can elaborate at all about the kind of inspiration, the source of, is there a way where, have you come across something and then that's got you thinking, and then that turns into something where you're thinking this is a real tangible or a real sensation-based interaction that I've had, and now it's, left you with this question?
Sometimes it's kind of the other way round. I see a material and it's usually a rusty thing by the side of the road or in a quarry or a piece of rock or something, and I will get that material and play with it and wonder what it is that attracts me to this thing, and draw it and wrap it in something, or mount it on something, have it as a sculpture in its own right for a while, look at it, think about it, and then sort of somewhere along the lines I will come to an understanding of what it is that's attracting me to this thing. Like I love bed springs, swirly, the old bed springs. If I can see one from a mile away and I'm straight over, like looking at it, and I've photographed them and I've wrapped them up and I've cut them into pieces and made big sculptures out of them. And it's and it's probably, I think it's something to do with the sort of cellular cohesion of them, the way they come together to become a mattress, but then they're all these individual things, and they're also sort of promise. And so in a way, like, it's a question I didn't know I had, but it's sort of something about myself. I like complexity, and that's reflected in, I like lots of lines all together. I get things attracted to drawing are always quite complicated and wiggly lines, and I think so that's a way of learning something about myself that I didn't know I had a question about, I think.
Am I right in thinking that bed springs are a larger spiral at the top and bottom, and then they go tighter and towards the centre? Yeah, that is a curious design. I should know this. My dad's an upholsterer and sells mattresses, and so we've kind of been through the different layers of what makes a mattress, which beyond the springs of the layers of foam and things like that to make orthopedic mattresses. But I was never certain about certain elements. They only went so far. But yeah, I suppose all of the different components that make objects can be quite fascinating in and of themselves, really, can't they? Yeah.
I love functional systems, but I also love things that look like they should do something but don't do something. That's a definition of art which I came across. I think that's what I was saying last time Moo showed up, was a definition of art that I'd come across was something, art is things which are not functional. Yes.
Yeah, is that?
Yeah, that's a kind of art foundation year 101, isn't it? Like there's art, and there's design, and the difference between the two is design has to do something and art doesn't.
Yeah.
Has to be functional. So you can talk about its formal qualities, its size, its scale, its material, and you can do that about both things. But then when you talk about art, you talk about its content, so what it means. You talk about design, you talk about its function.
I'm curious as to ask, this isn't actually something which I usually ask people, but because you're a teacher yourself and you're quite knowledgeable about some of these questions, I'd be curious to ask, this is something which I asked so many people in university and got so many different answers. What would you say is the difference between fine art and illustration?
No idea.
No.
I mean, apart from when you go into illustration, you know you're going into working for clients and deadlines and there's a lot of sort of technical stuff. You need to learn it that's specific to illustration about page layouts and color bleeds, and I don't know, I do illustration, but yes, I think it's more about drawing, and it doesn't put so much of the other stuff in, apart from now when it's all about everything, because everything is all about everything.
Yeah, I think that's the curious part, is that the lines have been blurred to the extent where if you're on an illustration course, it's illustration. If you're on a fine art course, it's fine art. But it can be using illustration to make fine art, or something which people might associate with illustration. So yeah, I just thought I'd pitch that to you, but that's probably one of the more easily understand or comprehensive answers I think that I've had. Other people have given me answers which are incomplete somewhat, because some people will say illustration is accompanied by writing and fine art isn't, which isn't really true, because fine art is accompanied by writing, by text, and illustration doesn't always have to be. But I see where they've got that idea from. And some people say illustration's for a client and fine art isn't, and that's not always the case. But I understand that certain of these things are consistent with illustration most of the time, and with fine art only some of the time. It's such a strange thing. Yeah.
By that definition, all the pre-Raphaelites would be illustrators.
Yeah.
Because it was all bits from poems and stuff, wasn't it?
That's true. I know people these days who make what looks like classical fine art pieces, and they call that illustration. So I never know where to draw the line, or if a line is to be drawn, really.
My first inspiration, definitely as a child, was absolutely illustration. Like, I think I was born in the golden age of children's illustration, kind of. There was still all the sort of Winnie the Pooh type books and Arthur Rackham and all those wonderful, wonderful drawings, and but then there was also lots of those crazy 70s, like really quite psychedelic illustrators coming up as well. I spent my whole childhood, I was quite a loner as a kid, and I spent my whole childhood in picture books, and that was all I wanted to do, was be able to draw like that. I wanted to draw beautiful women in lovely dresses with butterflies.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I still am a little bit obsessed with trying to be a better draftsman, but that's more my personal pursuit, I think. But yeah, there is different elements. Sorry. Yeah. No,
I also pursue trying to be a better draftsman all the time, and I do think drawing is one of the best ways to investigate your relationship between yourself and the thing.
Yeah.
Spending hours and hours with it, trying to draw it properly.
Yeah.
You can really get that. That was how I got my head around the bed springs, was I just drew them.
Brilliant.
Again.
Wow. I mean, I've been told before that that's how you truly see things, is to either draw them or spend that time observing them so that long that you are analysing from top to bottom the form, the colour, just how it's sits in its environment, and a lot of things which on a first observation won't necessarily occur to you, where on a deeper, more meditative session you'll have this, I don't know, a connection with this form, which I enjoy that aspect of it as well.
Me too, and I love the way, however long you look at something and however carefully you draw it and you measure it and you rub it out and you make sure everything's in the right place, it never looks exactly like the thing. You've always put some kind of editorial into it.
Yeah.
brought out the things that you're interested in, made less of the things that you're not.
Yeah.
You know, it lumpier or bumpier than it was, or smoother than it really is, or shinier than it really is, because that's the conversation between you and the object.
Absolutely. I quite like that. I think that's what makes drawings and artwork more valuable to me than, don't want to say just photographs, but a photograph is a fragment of a second, whereas a still life will be you spending, say, an hour or 10 minutes or however long you have with this object, which that's time and the movement of that space with you and the object, and a photograph only captures this microsecond, really. So, but I say that photographers do fantastic work, and I think I'm talking about the type of photographs that I'd take as a quick reference where I don't have a lot of this knowledge to inject.
I think taking a photograph doesn't get you closer to the object in a way. It almost, for me, takes you further away. We've all had holidays or great days out where actually you've just spent the whole time taking pictures, and you can't remember the day because you were just viewing it through the screen. So all you've got is the pictures left.
Yeah. To be honest, that's a literal trick which I was taught by my brother, who's a professional illustrator, and he told me how if you're drawing something and you've spent a long time drawing it, take a photograph, and it's like stepping away from it because it gives you a sense of distance. So it actually has that weird distance from the actual engagement with the object as well, where you can look at your drawing as though it were in another room, or that you've just walked some way away and can see it with a clearer, I don't know, it's weird. With a drawing, I think it helps seeing it from a distance, so that you're seeing it kind of shrunk down and minimalized, so that you can really analyze where you've gone wrong. It's just like doing a mirror image with of an image that you're drawing highlights anything where you are skewing the angle. As like you said before, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's more what you've heightened from what you're observing and what you're valuing about the object. Okay, so a question that I ask all of my guests, and I'm always fascinated to hear the answer, is, what's the most beautiful thing you've seen today?
I think it's called Traveller's Joy at the studio. We've got an infestation of it. It's actually a horrible plant that's kind of just covering all the pretty things we planted. But today it's in flux. It's currently going from funny little spider things on the end to these fluffy things that look like cats.
Oh, wow.
Really lovely. And it's just today that it's turning. So it's still pink on the inside and kind of fluffy on the outside. And
Traveller's Joy.
Staring at that going, wow, that's gorgeous.
Yeah. I'll have to try and find some photograph of that. Traveller's Joy, that sounds really interesting.
It must have a proper name. I think it's called Traveller's Joy because the flowers always point away from the sea, so it'll help you know where you are.
I see. So it helps navigate. Yeah, as a compass. That's really interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's I always love how unique those answers always are. When I ask people, I spoke to a filmmaker recently, and one of his most beautiful things that he'd seen, because he had to give me two, but one of them was a microphone that he wanted to purchase, which is hilarious. It shows how into his job he is, So yeah, that was hilarious. But Traveller's Joy, yeah, I couldn't have guessed that in a million years. That's brilliant. The next one's a double barrel question, and it's something which, just like the last question, was one which my mentor would ask me every time that I'd see her, because I'd always be making art. And I started to realise that she'd ask me every day because it was a very important question. Just like the most beautiful thing you've seen today is a question you can ask yourself every day, or be asked every day, and it would probably change because of different observations you make. This next one is, what do you like and what don't you like about your own artwork?
I like doing it, and I don't like exhibiting it.
Really? Oh, wow. That's amazing. So yeah, so the process of making art is something that you do like, but you don't like having to feel vulnerable in putting it out there in the world?
Oh, it's not even the vulnerability. I get very bored of everything I've made once I've stopped making it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I can relate to that actually. Once it's done, I kind of am done with it.
Yes, and then you get this sort of awful period of time, often too long, where your thing is on show. You forget about it, and people keep telling you how lovely it is, and you don't have to respond. Because it's like, well, it's not lovely. You're missing the point. Or
I disagree.
Or, thank you. Or oh God, that's still there, is it?
Oh wow! So yeah, that was very very succinct. I like that. That's really interesting. Well, excellent. Is there any social media you'd like to direct my audience to, that where they should check out your work, or any organisation that you're involved with, or anything that you think is worth checking out?
I am appalling at social media. I do have an Instagram, which is Lisa Santana Hudson on Instagram, and I also have a Facebook page of the same name, which is my art page. You're more likely to get stuff on Instagram than Facebook these days. But I would strongly recommend, and this is the thing that I'm most proud of, that I'm part of at the moment, which is Utopia's Bach, socially engaged project. We have a really fabulous website. There's loads of ways to get involved, and we are at www.utopiasbach.org. And yes, come along and join us for things that we do together. There's so much about it that the best recommendation I can give is go to the website and have a read.
Oh, fantastic. Well, all of the links will be in the description below this video, as always. But yeah, I'd just like to thank you very much for being a guest on the podcast. It's been really lovely talking to you.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been really interesting. First time I've done something like this.
Oh, excellent. Well, hopefully it's not the last. If you'll come on again, I'd love to have you on next year, maybe after a period of more exhibits, more things that you're bored with and finished with, and glad to see the back of.
Brilliant.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, so that is the episode. And I really appreciated that conversation. I thought it was lovely. I especially loved the slate dress. What an incredible idea. And to have those images was really nice as well. And there's lots of her work which I've seen now on her Instagram, which all of the links for her social media I'll leave in the description below. But yeah, check her out. She's a fantastic artist, a really lovely person. You can tell from the conversation that we had that she's just incredibly intelligent, insightful and generous and talented person. So I really do appreciate her time. And I'm looking forward to talking to her again, because I know that we'll have a great conversation, and I'm hoping to catch up with her at other places. I'm sure I'll see her at other exhibits. I've already seen her at one exhibit that I went to last weekend. And it's again, thanks to Petra. She's such a good connect for me to this network of artists in North Wales. And she always tells me about different exhibitions that are on and invites me to join her. And when I do, I get to meet lovely people like Lisa. So if you can, please go and support her social media and any exhibits that you see her work at, because you can tell it's beautiful work and very interesting. Oh, I mentioned in the introduction that I'd seen her work at Storiel Gallery. So I don't know, maybe I put up the images there, but if not, then let me put up a few images here from that, because it was really interesting and it stuck in my head. There were several different artists exhibiting there, but I remember looking at this and it just made me pause for a moment and be quite curious. But because I was with someone, I didn't fully soak up the information of the exhibit. I need to get better at that, really. I think I'm still quite cautious to be out in social situations, and I think that changes how comfortable I am in these spaces. So I'm going to try and relax a little bit. If I'm committing to doing a certain thing, like going to visit an exhibition, then I should really try to get all of the benefits that I used to, instead of what I do these days, which is, I don't know, feeling a slight sense of panic and unrest or unease, or feeling a little bit, anxious, basically. And that's something which changes my experience, sadly. But there we are. Her work was beautiful, very interesting, and wonderful person to talk to. I really appreciate her being on as a guest, and I thank you very much for watching. If you did like this episode, then please leave a like, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, ring that notification bell, share this with any friends and family who you think might enjoy it, or anyone who's interested in art at all. Please support all of the links for Lisa that I'm going to leave in the description below. And thank you again for watching. I will see you in the next episode.